Well, it's great to be back here at the JFK Club. I am encouraged to see a good amount of people here, despite how wet it is outside and how wet it was all day. We had a nice week going for us. What happened? Hey, I guess our spring flowers will soon be in full bloom, and we need this weather. But I've come from not too far from here. Although I had to do some work in the city today, I live only a short distance, about 2 miles. I am from Queens. I love Queens. My family came here. My grandparents were immigrants, and they came right to Queens. This is where they knew that they would, or whether they knew it or not, Queens allowed them to build their American dream. My grandparents were poor. They came from farmers' families, and things were tough in Ireland. When they came here, they wanted to work very hard, like many of our immigrant families have, from all over. And they had big families, and my father and mother together had 15 children. Ooh. That's similar to a lot of Orthodox families that you have in Kew Garden Hills. You have as well in the Crowley family. So I'm one of 15. I have 14 brothers and sisters, and I'm born at the end of the family. But my parents shared that fierce determination that so many of our immigrant families share today, that if they work hard and they sacrifice, that they could give their kids a better opportunity than they had themselves.
Her father has a school named after him, the Walter Crowley Middle School.
So my father, and I was very young, unfortunately my father died, he was only 53 years old, he died from cancer, and all of a sudden, my mother was left to raise so many of us on her own. And I really think about that time. I was only 7 when my father died, but I was raised by a single mother. And I had 10 older sisters that also helped. But, as a woman today in politics, there still are so few. Even though you may have heard that last year might have been the year of the woman, and we had over 100 women elected to Congress and to represent us in the U.S. Senate. Combined, I think it was over 120. Those were record numbers. But I learned from growing up that women can do just about anything they put their mind to, as long as you work hard and do the right thing. We had a strong sense of faith in our family. We had to go to church every Sunday, and my family and the faith stretched out into the community. I watched my parents, and certainly my mother after my father, give and be a part of a larger community. And whether it's your faith community or your family, what you do and how you spend your day has a lot to do with the impact you could have in the greater community. So when I decided to get involved, I was very young. I actually followed my passions. When I was a kid in school, I wasn't sure that what I wanted to study. And I actually didn't find out until I was in high school that I had a talent for the arts. I was good at painting. So I went to college and I studied fine arts. And one of my first jobs out of college, my first job was working as a painter on construction sites. Yeah. But I was a decorative painter, and I loved the work that I did. I worked on historic buildings. You might have visited the Central Synagogue in Manhattan on 57th Street, one of the finest built synagogues in the city. Unfortunately, right around the time that I was graduating, there was a terrible fire, and that I had an opportunity to work with a team of painters to put such beautiful mosaics on the wall and gold stars of David on the ceiling of the synagogue. And I worked in other places like St. Patrick's Cathedral and Central Synagogue and the Empire Theater, historic buildings. But I learned when I used my hands and I worked in an environment with other laborers how important it was to have government representation for the workforce. And I got involved with my union. And you know, you say, oh, you know, Crowley name, political family. Yes, but it was really my union that showed me how important it was for a working person to have representation in government. And they supported my efforts when I ran for city council. And believe it or not, in my district, when I was elected, I was not only elected the first woman city council member, but I was also elected the first Democrat in a district that had only been represented by Republicans in that city council district. So when I went to the council, I was ready. You know, I had run for that seat before. I didn't make it. I was persistent about beating the Republicans and representing an area and making sure that the whole community had a voice in the city council. I had felt certain neighborhoods that were more diverse than other neighborhoods, such as Ridgewood or Woodhaven, didn't get as much as a community like Middle Village. Those are some of the neighborhoods. You're laughing.
I know.
Yes. So fair shares was something I grew up in my big family with. I would have to fight for my own fair share, but I realized, you know, my big family told me to fight for what was right and what I believed in. And when I got to the council, things weren't the way I had perceived them to be in terms of working with my colleagues in the larger budget. I certainly didn't like the way some districts would only get, you know, $1 million in discretionary funds, and other districts would get 10 or even $20 million. And the reason that was because as the speaker at the time would punish council members who didn't vote the same way as she wanted them to, or we didn't toe their line, we would get punished. And I was a courageous council member that fought back. And I said, these policies need to change. I even spoke to the New York Times. My colleagues said I was crazy. But I can tell you this, by the time I left the city council, every single district was getting its fair share. And today, every district gets a minimum of $5 million in discretionary funds, and very few get much more than that. It depends really on need and not on political alliances. I bring that up because although I haven't announced formally that I'm running for borough president, I'm strongly considering it. Because I believe Queens as a borough doesn't get its fair share. We've always been forgotten about. We're an outer borough. Well, if we were our own city and we succeeded from the city of New York, we would be the 4th largest in the country. We're not that much smaller than Brooklyn. But when it comes to the amount of money that is spent on education, our pupils aren't getting their fair share. Our kids are in more overcrowded schools. And for each student, we're only getting 80% of what the Bronx is getting, or 90% of what Brooklyn is getting. Is that fair? No. No. I think when you look at the transportation infrastructure, Queens is half the amount of subway stops. So if they were to put this congestion pricing in place to fix the subways, we're going to pay for Brooklyn without any real enhancements to Queens. When it comes to cultural affairs, dollars for health care, you name it, Queens does not get its fair share. We need a leader who will go and work with the other borough presidents and demand from the mayor that each borough gets its fair share. And that we have programs in place to not only support our kids in the schools, but to support people who want to move in and around our borough or to other areas of the city more efficiently, to improve our transportation infrastructure, to make sure that our hospitals are well funded and that our seniors have a place to go. I want to make sure Queens, that was that place for my grandparents that came here to achieve the American dream, that my kids and even my mother, that they are both able to stay and afford to live in our borough. And unless we have plans put in place, and I then went on, I didn't mention earlier, but after I did that work in those buildings, I did some community organizing with my union, then I went and I studied urban planning and architecture. And we haven't planned the borough efficiently. We have seen the borough grow faster than any planner could have imagined, or it certainly seems that way. Housing, transportation, our infrastructure needs enhancements. And so know that while I haven't formally announced, partly, because I've said this, I've been on this listening and learning tour, and I noticed it's the JFK Club, and JFK has some very notable quotes, and one of them is about listening and leadership. And it goes something like this. JFK once said that listening and leadership are indispensable from one another. And so I'm here to listen, and I hope that you will share, like, what you think we could do to improve our borough. And over the past 6 months, this listening and learning is a grassroots effort. This campaign hasn't taken any money from corporations. We've received over 550 small contributions, although we've surpassed other people who are saying that they're interested in running. This is community and grassroots driven, and I would love for you to be a part of that. So thanks for having me here tonight, and please let me know what's important to you, and if you have any questions, go right ahead.
Alan?
As I said before, Liz, you've heard this. If Queens is not respected, we should just take our airports and leave the city. New York City would have no airports without us, so we deserve a lot of respect.
The city owns the airports, but yes.
But it's New York City, and if we left, we would take our
I
airports
agree with
also.
you. Do you know that out of the 62 counties in the entire state, we have 62 counties, Queens is second to Manhattan when it comes to generating tourism dollars. But we don't get those dollars back to spend in our borough. I would like to see a tourism council that puts some levy on the airport, or even if it's just, 50 cents on every flight that goes out. Some way that we can take the funds that are getting generated. It has been more of a burden than a benefit having the two airports here. And the Port Authority is a rich authority. We need to get more for what we're given.
Yeah, I have a ton of questions, but I'll keep it to one.
All right.
What's your view on overdevelopment and the fact that they're cramming taller buildings into residential neighborhoods, and you just can't,
No parking.
you can't ride in the subways, you can't take buses, you can't do anything. There's just too many people in Queens.
Right, I studied planning, and I firmly believe in a planning process that's inclusive of the community. That's one benefit that's put in place. An infrastructure Borough President has is the 14 different community boards, with each board having a land use and zoning committee. And that when major developments are proposed, it must come before the local planning community board, where people can come and voice their opinions and concerns. We can't overdevelop. We need to build smart communities with ample green space. We have to think of, and I truly believe, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I think Queens could be the first borough and the first county in the state without a carbon footprint. We're a big city on our own, but we're also the largest in area compared to the other boroughs. And we could potentially put infrastructure in place to do smart planning, to green our buildings. And when we do build, we need to build making sure that we have enough space where people can live comfortably.
Next question.
Two questions. What do you think about the homeless shelters making in small neighborhoods like Glendale, Maspeth? Also the prison, they're thinking about making
Rikers Island breakup.
over Kew Gardens. What thoughts on both of them?
Okay. So, homelessness is a problem that has grown out of control under Mayor de Blasio. I am the only council member that sued him on his homelessness policies. A lot of the particular proposals and policy changes that I proposed for the de Blasio administration to do when they started to see the numbers rise, they're only starting to implement now. They had these cluster apartments that they were cleaning up and putting back on the market, taking families out, putting them into hotels. I made a lot of noise about the policies, and now they're finally cleaning up the apartments and keeping families in them, not making those families go homeless. That was a big problem contributing to the rise of homelessness. The mayor likes to make like he's building a ton of affordable housing. The truth of the matter, there is not. There's not been real affordable housing built. Certainly not in Queens, another area where we're not getting our fair share. Manhattan has gotten significantly more affordable housing, and so has Brooklyn. When you talk about developments happening, such as Long Island City, and the people in Long Island City, many of the people are very frustrated with the lack of traditional planning that goes into building and expanding communities. But there was no real affordable housing built. Not under this administration, not to the extent that we need. And as a borough president, I would make that a top priority and help to design communities where there's space and there's transportation in place to support that growth.
No, but Rikers Island, Kew Gardens.
Okay, so I know more than the average person probably knows about Rikers Island because I chaired the Criminal Justice Committee. On the City Council, I was the chair of the Fire Committee, which had oversight of the fire department. This is for 8 of the 9 years I was on the council. So remember back when the mayor wanted to close the firehouses?
Yes.
I led the fight, even though that's part of the reason I was getting into those arguments with the then speaker. There was a plan in place to close firehouses. Bloomberg had closed 7. And he wanted to close another 20 when I was there, but we stopped him, thank God. Another area that I had oversight was the Department of Correction now. The good thing in this city is that, I don't know the actual statistics today, but I know statistics year by year. Fewer and fewer people are getting arrested. Last year, there was something under 300 murders, whereas 10 or 15 years, when I was growing up in Queens, there were a lot more. In the 90s, when we had the crack epidemic, there were something like over 3,000 murders, significantly higher. You might remember how many times you would hear about your neighbors or you've been a victim of a car theft. I can't tell you how many times that happened while I was growing up. We have seen the amount of crime reduced significantly, and there's nothing more important. When I was in the council, I also led the fight to put 1,000 new police officers into the budget, because there's nothing more important than public safety. And, but the fact is, fewer people, and thank goodness, crime has reduced, it is a safer community, are getting arrested, and fewer people are put in jails. Rikers Island is not a prison, it's just a holding cell. Only 10% of the people on the island have been sentenced. Anybody who's been sentenced to serve time should go to a prison. And upstate, that's where we have prisons. That population could be removed from the island, as well as the fact that many of them go down. I don't even think today that there's less than 7,000 people who are incarcerated in the whole city. And we have jails in Brooklyn, and we have a jail in the Bronx. So on Rikers Island, there may be less than 5,000 people there. We have a jail by the courthouse that the plans are already in place. I think it's gone through and it's about to be finishing its ULURP process. One thing I knew about Rikers Island while I was chair was that we would spend upwards of over $30 million just transporting inmates to show up for their court date. And sometimes they didn't get there in time, so they had to come back the next day. Those things we don't realize, but it's almost more dangerous to have these buses with inmates on them in the community trying to get to the courthouse than having them right near the courthouse. So if there's a plan in place and it's already going through, I'm not gonna be the one out there protesting against it, because I don't think it's gonna make our community any less safe. What I do think is important is that we make sure that when somebody is arrested, that their case comes to trial as quickly as possible. And if they're found guilty of whatever they did, that they should go to prison which the state pays for, not the city.
First, I want to say, I have the only Elizabeth Crowley Memorial Newtown Pippin apple tree in Queens. You gave me that tree, you gave me a hazelnut and a plum. But that aside, did you know that Flushing Meadow Corona Park is larger than Central Park? Talk about green space. And I would love to have you move the MTA out of my Willow Lake.
That's like, that's trying to follow, that's not, you can't do it, sorry.
Where can we put them?
Oh, I don't care. Put them in Manhattan.
You
We'll
can't.
talk more. I like the way you think.
What do you think about the Amazon deal?
Barbara, you had a question? Barbara, you had a question?
I was gonna ask about Rikers Island. I mean, you know, we've been told that it's the builders who want Rikers Island and sort of bought their way into it. What do you say about that?
Or it's the airport.
Okay.
They want the land, yeah.
I think that whatever the future of Rikers Island, whatever happens there, should be decided by the people. And it should not be developed with housing. I don't agree with that. I don't think, I saw the passion that the previous speaker had and how people's civil rights, people were getting killed there, left and right, it seemed. And a young boy, was kept in solitary confinement and later found out that he wasn't even guilty of stealing a backpack. He was on the island for 3 years for stealing a backpack, and then later took his own life because partly he said he couldn't escape the demons of what was happening to him on Rikers Island. I don't think it was developers. I've never taken from developers. If you look at any of my campaign financing, nobody who was a developer ever met with me about whatever future plan I have. There was a commission put together to see if it was even feasible to close the island, and they came back with an idea of turning the island into a space where you could green the borough. I mean, you could compost, you could take away some of the noxious facilities that generate energy in and around Queens and put clean energy type of facilities that could generate power and clean our environment. I mean, any use that happens should benefit, not burden us.
Yeah.
Is it true also that crime goes up? We were told by, I think it was the assistant district attorney, all these things. And he also said crime tends to go up in areas where they have these jails. Is that true?
There's a jail in downtown Brooklyn by Metro Tech, not too far from the Barclays Center or Atlantic Terminal. The apartments there are luxury apartments. They sell for millions of dollars. I could never afford to live in that area.
Does
even
crime
though
go up?
It hasn't been proven. I can't see how it goes up. I honestly haven't been shown that.
And why was it pushed through without enough input from the community?
It's going on right now. It's going on right now, so it's not final. I'm not in the council, but I was under the impression that there's been community meetings and that it's going through its land use process. It was a jail, it was used as a jail not too long ago. And there are inmates that stay there during the day, the ones that get transported and have to show up for trial that day.
You mentioned congestion pricing, and I'm totally against it. But also you mentioned the trains and the fares. Something we reading a while ago about they wanted to lower the fares for people that didn't have a lot of money and stuff like that. So of course you didn't go to school and you're uneducated. I should pay for that. I didn't go to school. I went back to school, got an education. You know, what's the deal there? And then you saw a guy today jump over the turnstile. And they want to let these go. It's nonviolent fun. No, arrest these people, man. Sign them, get the money. Come on, let's get serious.
People are getting summons for jumping.
I was so furious when I saw
Yeah.
this.
And the reduced fare is also for seniors.
I'm talking about seniors, they wanna do it with people with less income. They wanna do it for people with less income.
Yeah, the
because they
mayor
have a lot of
wants to
money.
do
The
that.
mayor hasn't put his plan in place, but the council did.
That's
vote-
wrong.
vote
I'm
that.
sorry, go get a job, get a better job, that's all. You know? That's selfish, I'm honest.
All right, I'll take,
Yeah,
one
I-
last question.
Yeah, you said that when you were a city council member, certain districts in the city didn't get their fair share of money.
Yeah.
Some would get 5 million, others would get 20.
Yeah.
That was all straight, that's how they leveraged the council members to follow the leader, so to speak. Correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I'm just.
Pretty much,
Yeah, in other words, they wanted you to vote a certain way or do certain
Right.
things. Now what are they doing today to manipulate the council members? I know it's a dirty
They
question,
don't
but
get
I
no money
thought
for committees no more.
There
they are-
was independence that was respected in the previous council, and we had to get to a point where we put legislation in place to protect the body, because it was so out of control under the previous administration. And I could just tell you that was a council member that was independent and that never tried to be in the good graces of another politician just so I could get more funding. I always was somebody who did what I felt like voted or took a stance on issues that I believed were the right stance to take.
Yeah, I know, I'm not questioning you, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
what are they doing today to manipulate, we don't have to name names, but they have to control them in some way, it's part of the business of doing business in the city.
We should invite the speaker to come to your next one.
Yes, good,
Elizabeth,
okay,
The
there's your
question
answer.
was half raised here about Amazon's role at Long Island City. Do you agree that they should have been driven out, or should they have been given a chance to build?
Okay. Amazon was afforded the tax breaks that most corporations are afforded in the law, the way the state
New York
legislature
Knicks.
and the governor got together with them many years ago to put this Empire State Development Plan together. And whether it be, as you said, the New York Knicks or other corporations, the only difference that I saw in this particular deal was that the Amazon was going to get a grant, which was a lot of money, $500 million, $500 million, to ensure that they hired union labor to build their headquarters on Annabelle Basin, Amazon, in Long Island City. So, they shouldn't have been chased away. I don't agree with the way they left, but I wouldn't have taken the stance that the local politicians did. I also don't think that our other politicians, you know, the ones that attracted them here in the first place, spoke loud enough in support or actually communicated what the truth was. There was a big misconception about. And I was not happy that 25,000 jobs that were planned for Queens West and would have benefited all of Queens are now not in the plans. I hope they reconsider. I do think that they should have been a better partner, and that I hope that they have regrets, because I don't think there's a better place to open shop than here in Queens. We have the talent, and we are the most diverse borough. We're the most diverse place. We have what other places don't have, and it's their loss. So I want to make sure that other businesses don't get scared away, and I would be a leader that says Queens is open for business.
How are you?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Who is this lady who was speaking?